Hi, I'm Ronnie from Ronnie's Garage. Welcome to our monthly tech meet for the Rolls-Royce Owners Club of Southern California. And today we will be disassembling and resealing a Silver Cloud 3 steering pump. These are 1/4-inch bolts to hold it so it doesn't have to be super tight. Maybe 10 pounds, 12 pounds. Originally these, like we showed before, these come with a Phillips screw, but these have been replaced with a nice hex head or Allen type screw. They call it a socket head cap screw.
You do that crossover tightening thing again.
Yes. Usually when you torque something or tighten something, you want to, since I'm pushing this bearing in there, I'm just gently just walking back and forth on those, but I don't tighten them totally until I get everything started. Like, yeah. Looks like I tightened them too soon because this one doesn't want to start. Let's see, I thought I had it started. That's better. All right, your bearing's in there. Make sure it turns. If it doesn't turn, you did something wrong. Okay, now we can just set this right here. We're not going to clamp it. Now, as we talked about when we took it apart, we've got to remember the rotation of this. First of all, we've got a little, if you look right there, there's a groove in there, right there, that this little pin lays in. If you want to keep it in place, you can put a little grease in that groove. And then place it in there. And it should pretty much stay there unless you get too aggressive there. Now, when this is on the car, the front of the engine turns in from the front, turns in a clockwise direction. So, as I mentioned before, it's supposed to be like a sprinkler. So it throws things out. If you can see, these legs go in that direction. So this is the proper direction. So when it's turning, it goes like that. You don't want to do it like that because then you're working up against this sharp edge with the rollers. So now let's find our pin. And it should just drop right in there if you get it lined up properly. These are your rollers. You see it's kind of offset here so that the vanes basically of this, or the impeller, are real close on this side and it's open over here. And what that does is it allows, as it goes through the deep part here, the wide part, to scoop up some fluid, and then as it comes up here it compresses it, and then it sends it out to the these things are not spring-loaded, they just, centrifugal force is what moves them out. All right, now we've got an O-ring here. This one's a little bit shrunk. Sometimes you can stretch them out a little bit.
So those are new, you didn't...
This is brand new O-ring, yes. This is the old one, it's flat and crispy. And then there is another O-ring here for this passage. And you don't want to use too thick a O-ring because when you tighten this up, it'll warp it. So I will put on the bushing on this end, I will put a little of this grease. You don't have to pack it full of grease, it'll fill up with fluid pretty quick. And then as you can see, there's 2 indexing pins, so you put it together the right way. There it is. Now I have sourced some brand new bolts that we had to drill the old ones out. 1/4-inch 28 socket head cap screws. And they're about 1 inch long, it looks like.
Where'd you get those?
McMaster Car, online. Wonderful source. That's where I got all the seals and O-rings too. Normally you don't have to drill out screws on these, but the socket head cap screw is nice because it has a small head and it can fit into tight places. But if you put an old worn out tool in it or it's seized in there, they don't want to come out and they'll round off the tool. and or the socket head, which is why we had to drill those out. You just want to drill the head off. You don't want to drill into the hole and change the size of anything if you don't have to. The head, once you get down past this point, the head will just disappear, and then you can force the body apart, and then you'll have, as you saw before, you'll have a good piece of that broken bolt sticking out so you can grab it.
Oh, that's right. We use your drill press. I remember that. Right.
Okay, now it's getting close. I'm going to just gently clamp the outside of this housing here in the vise so it doesn't spin on me, and now I will. See, I'm doing it in a crisscross pattern. It's just a force of habit no matter what anymore. For me. Okay. As I said, they don't have to be super tight. All you really need to do is get them, both those surfaces back flush and compress the O-rings. All right, now you always want to make sure that shaft still turns. If it doesn't, you've got a problem. Now, for ease of final assembly, I'm going to put the mounting bolts back on for the adapter to the cylinder head. Of course, I don't have the right socket. I'll be right back. Once I get all those bolts started, I can go ahead and clamp this in here. This just makes it easier to work on once you get that body together. These are 1/4-inch bolts also, so they don't have to be super tight. Okay. Now, the relief valve, where's it go? It's over here. And remember the way it came out. I'm pretty sure this hasn't been disturbed, so it went in this way. What the relief valve does is when you're, come on baby, when your pump builds pressure, if you don't have some way of it stop building pressure, it'll just keep pumping until it blows up. So this is set, this valve, once it gets up to 1,250 pounds, this thing moves due to spring tension and valving in here. There we go. It moves and allows the pressure, once it reaches 1,200, the excess to just recirculate. So it's a relief valve. It has a plug. Oh, this is 750, sorry. What am I thinking of? It's 750 right there. That's a PSI. I'm thinking of a later card. So it has an O-ring on there, which it just fits into a chamfer, so that's just to seal it. I put a little grease on there. That's for giggles. And let's see here. Grab a wrench, 15/16. That should be tight enough. It doesn't have to be super tight, just enough to bottom out and not compress that O-ring. Okay, now we can put the pulley back on. The pulley has a woodruff, which is that square key in there that has to line up with this square groove. So there it is.
And there's no front or back of this?
There is. There is a front and a back. As you can see, this side is longer than this is. So what that does is it bottoms out against that bearing. Holds everything in place. If you put it on backwards, it would rub up against here and you wouldn't be able to tighten it. It wouldn't turn. Always make sure things move freely as you're reassembling them, rather than putting it all together and finding out it's frozen. This should only be maybe 25 pounds. The reason I use an impact gun is it's hard to hold this and do the torquing at the same time. That's close enough. Plus, I like to make noise. All right, the reservoir. It has an adapter plate here. If you look at this front bearing retainer, it stands up above this housing of that body. And what they do is they make an adapter plate so it sits level, sits flat. And this adapter plate has 4 O-rings, one on each, or 2 on each side of the plate. So you got those 2, and it's important that you turn that there are O-rings on either side of the plate. So don't put 2 O-rings in there and stack it this way. You gotta have it. These O-rings seal against this body, and then the upper O-rings seal against the reservoir housing. And then there's a small O-ring up here to keep the oil in the reservoir, and not, because if you don't replace that, then what'll happen is you'll have leakage around here, minimal, but then you'll think that your front seal's out when you're looking at it. So that sits right up on there.